Good afternoon and welcome to the August 22nd meeting of the Rotary Club of Lowell. I'm Luke Schmidt, President of our club and President of L.H. Schmidt Associates. To lead us in our invocation today is Leland Whitman. Leland is the retired Executive Director of the Greater Lowell Medical Society, one of our best past presidents, a charter member of the 1912 Society, and also Paul Arizona. Behold, David Snyder would also please join us on the stage. Okay. Julie's going to present again. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. First of all, Ginger Wallace attended the United States Air Force Academy and retired from the Air Force in 2017. And during her 27-year career, she gained extensive leadership experience, commanding flights, and culminating her career in the Pentagon, where she was responsible for professional development for more than 5,000 airmen. She returned to Kentucky to continue serving her community and her state. Ginger recently co-chaired the steering committee of the Metro Government's first ever participatory budgeting initiative and was recently named the Lowell Park Foundation Board of Directors. She is a board member for the original Highlands Neighborhood Association, also a member of the Metro City Councilman Brandon Combs District 8 Advisory Council. Her current profession is volunteer work with civic and nonprofit organizations. Ginger sponsors are Alice Bridges and Judy Henry. Andrew Holmes. Andrew has spent his entire career working in the banking industry here in Lowell. He is currently the local market president of Park National Bank, an $8 billion community bank. Andrew's first introduction to Rotary occurred in 1993 when he was recognized as an unsung hero by this very club for his work at Lowell Male High School. Andrew attended Georgetown College, where he earned a Bachelor of Arts in American Studies with a double minor in political science and history. He also earned his CCIM designation from the CCIM Institute and graduated from the Swingers Graduate School of England. Andrew and his wife Jennifer have a teenage daughter who are not working as they enjoy playing golf and traveling. Andrew's sponsors are Barry Allen and Carl Thomas. Andrew, welcome. Now, last but certainly not least, David Snyder. David is the Director of Development for New Directors Housing Corporation. David brings over 25 years of experience working and volunteering for nonprofit organizations, having served recently as the Executive Director for the Legal Aid Movement in Northern California. David and his wife Judy moved to Lowell in November 2017 to be closer to their daughter and son-in-law, who had their first grandchild just 2 weeks after they arrived at Baptist Health. David and Judy attend Airgrass Christian Church and volunteer at the head of the state, assisting those living in homeless camps and on the streets here in Lowell. One of his fun facts is one of his sons' 12th birthday, that now gets the paintball, and apparently that becomes his passion. So they were recently in Eastern Pennsylvania on the 78th course with 3,000 other paintballs. I'll be back. Dave, welcome. Let's give everybody all three of them. And now for a shout out. Tuesday night, Business Synergy and Prospective Member Reception for the future success. And I'd like to ask if any of the members of the Business Synergy Committee are here to give a stand and recognition. This was a terrific event, over 40 Rotarians and guests in attendance. And several folks we want to thank, first of all, the Business Synergy Committee itself, for organizing the event, to Rick Smith and the Kentucky School of Art and Design for hosting us, and Ingrid Designs for co-sponsored the event, along with the Kentucky College of Arts and Design. And certainly the Rotarians that attended and brought to us, we appreciate it. Again, it was a wonderful event. So please, a round of applause for it. Okay, and our guest speaker will be introduced by Ken Grossman. Ken is the president and owner of Executive Image Custom Clothier. Paul Harris, one of the guest speakers in the show.
Thank you, Luke. Really an honor today to introduce Timothy Joseph Allen. Grew up in Louisville and has gone on to do some really interesting things. And on your Rotary, he gets opportunity to hear from an interesting gentleman like him. So, Timothy Joseph Allen is an American figurative painter who's been living and working in Rome, Italy for over 20 years. He began his career in 1992, earning a BA in studio art at DePaul University and an MFA in painting at my favorite school, Indiana University, Bloomington, 1998. He's been teaching at the American University of Rome since 2006 and has managed his own painting school, the Painting and Drawing Art Studio of Rome, since 2010. Allen's medium is oil on canvas, and his style and subject matter are principally inspired by the Renaissance and Baroque. Of special importance to his process is painting from life. Allen says, I enjoy painting most when the presence of the subject and the passage of time combine to add urgency to my analysis, intuition, and performance. In recent years, his work has been pre-selected and or selected in several international competitions, including Royal Society of Portrait Painters, the Figure Tiva's Painting and Sculpture Competition in Barcelona, the Worldwide Kitsch Online Painting Competition, and the BP National Gallery Portrait Competition in London. Please give a warm Rotary Club of Louisville welcome to our speaker today, Timothy Joseph Allen.
Okay, thank you. Hello. Thank you very much for having me today. It's a privilege and an honor to be able to speak with you. I think I have all of the technology ready, and the lights, we can dim them. Nick, we good? It's going to be important for you to be able to see one of the screens, so including me. I'm going to have glasses on here. Thank you again to Ken Grossman for inviting me to speak. Thank you, President Luke. Am I allowed to refer to you as President Luke? And I'm delighted to be joined today by my wife, Stefania, my mom, Caroline, and my dad, Dr. Dave, and of course, my daughter, Grace Caroline. She is the backup speaker today. So in the event, it is the season of America's Got Talent, as I understand it. So you can ding your glasses if this doesn't go well, and she will give you a presentation on animals, Minecraft, and show you how to dance the floss. I am going to speak to you today about Baroque painter named Caravaggio. And I'm going to present something called formal analysis. And I'm going to show you how an examination using formal analysis might be useful in revealing meaning and finding metaphorical significance that might not be readily apparent. Okay? And Leland, your introduction was spot on. You're convocation. You are hired. I'm going to take you with me. But before I do that, let's see if this is working again. There we go. That's pronounced Versailles. As Ken said, I've lived in Rome for 20 years now. And when people ask me, what do you like best about living in Italy? My answer is almost always, no tool time jokes. And on the flip side of that, Italians will listen to me speak their language, and they will notice just a subtle accent difference. And they will ask me where I'm from, and I will tell them I'm from Kentucky. And then they'll get an even more puzzled look on their face. As some think that I speak the language somewhat proficiently, and they'll ask me, why is that? And I will tell them, everybody in Kentucky speaks Italian. So if you don't already, now you know what your mission is to help keep my dream alive. Okay, today when you leave. So, little segue here. From Caravaggio to Rome. Now that may seem like a peculiar title, because Caravaggio, as I've said, is the name of the artist that I'm going to speak about. But Caravaggio, like some of his colleagues, became known by the name of his hometown. So Caravaggio is a small town in northern Italy. There are other examples. Probably the most famous is the artist we all know. Well, hang on a second, I'm getting ahead of myself. So what is his real name? Well, his real name is Michelangelo Merisi. Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio. And probably the most famous artist that we know that includes the name of his hometown is one from the town of Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci. Now, we mostly know by Leonardo. And in the case of Michelangelo Merisi, you can see that Michelangelo was already taken, so he came later. He became known as Caravaggio. Okay, so Rome in the time of Caravaggio. I want to give you some context. What was Rome like? Well, first of all, he gets to Rome in the 1590s. He is born, by the way, in 1571. So he's, the end of his teens. He gets to Rome. He's come down to seek his fortune. The Counter-Reformation is in full swing. The Counter-Reformation was a response to the Protestant Reformation, and in 1517, the Counter-Reformation was also a response to the sack of Rome, which happened in 1527. And then from 1540 to 1560, you have what is referred to as the Council of Trent. And so by the time Caravaggio's come to Rome, the rules of the Counter-Reformation are being enforced. And to help shed some light on how serious they were about this, the church issued directives to painters on what they were to do, and I'm going to share some of those directives with you. And heretics were handled with extreme prejudice. Okay? Now, an example of that is Giordano Bruno. Giordano Bruno was a predecessor to Galileo Galilei. He advanced the Copernican belief that the Earth revolved around the sun, and he even suggested that there were many suns and many other planets. There was a plurality of worlds. And some of these ideas the Catholic Church deemed dangerous, so much so that in 1600 they sentenced him to death and burned him alive in the center of Campo di Fiori. And what you see there is a small relief sculpture that is on the side of a monument to Giordano Bruno that depicts that scene. And what I want to emphasize is, notice the date, 1600. Tap there we go. This was Caravaggio's neighborhood. Campo di Fiori. When I teach this class, the class that I teach where the Art of Rome, I didn't mention that, I'll come back to that later. We are walking the streets of Caravaggio, and I suspect that he saw this execution. Here is a look at Campo di Fiori today. It is one of the more popular open markets that you can visit, and you can see, oh, here we go, let's see if this is going to work. This wouldn't be cool. Boom. There you can see the statue to Giordano Bruno in the center of the square. Okay, not far from Campo di Fiori is a church called San Luigi dei Francesi. And it is inside this church that you have a chapel named the Contarelli Chapel. There will be a quiz at the end of this. I don't see many of you taking notes. there is the Untitled Chapel, and Caravaggio is awarded the opportunity to decorate the Untitled Chapel, and the presentation of this chapel in 1600 is what will make Caravaggio a superstar. Now, I mentioned Art of Rome. Art of Rome is an art history class that I teach to unsuspecting study abroad students, and what makes this class special is that almost every class is in situ. Almost every class is on site. So when we arrive at the time to speak about Caravaggio, we are standing in front of this church, and we go in and we look at his paintings, and we talk about his paintings. But before we go in, what I have my students do is put yourself in the shoes of the painter. You are given the opportunity to decorate a chapel. And in this case, it is the theme of the chapel will be the namesake of the guy who's paying for it. That sounds fair. So Matteo Pontarelli wants his chapel dedicated to St. Matthew. And there will be three scenes that are to be depicted. The Vocazione di San Matteo, the calling of St. Matthew writing the Gospel, and the martyrdom. Okay? What I have my students do is, when they have their notebooks, I say, okay, I want everybody to give me their best stick figure. I should have made this more interactive. I should have had you guys do this too. But, and I want them to try and draw, at least suggest, how do you depict that scene? You know, and the interesting thing is the artists at that time, mainly, they had very limited things to go by. And so what you would do is you would go to the literary source, and in the case of the calling of St. Matthew, let me share with you what Caravaggio had as a guide. This is from the Bible. This is Matthew 9:9. Quote, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, he told him. Similar to what you said earlier, Leland, you were right on. He told me, and Matthew got up and followed him. And that's it. That's the text. That's the calling of St. Matthew. So how do you construct a visual narrative from that? Okay? Well, that's why you have the painters. So this is a look at the Untitled Chapel. It shows you the three sections that he's going to paint. There are the three paintings, and the painting I'm going to talk to you about today is the painting on the left, again called Calling of St. Matthew. Here is the image. Now, I don't know how well you can see that. It looks pretty dark from what I can see, but I hope you can see it. Now, two things. First of all, a little bit more about Caravaggio. What made Caravaggio special? What made him revolutionary? Well, for starters, he was the first one to bring a kind of journalistic approach to the imagery. So when you look at something like this, especially in the time of Caravaggio, you would say, well, this looks like the interior of our local pub, and I can see clothes that some of my friends wear when they go out in town. And so there's a realism to this that didn't exist previously. Before there was much more color, and there were much kind of idyllic images. So he now kind of brings this down to earth. And of course the other thing is just the quality of the tenebrous quality, which means the extreme light and dark. Some like to say that Caravaggio was a master of chiaroscuro. That's not really true. Chiaroscuro is what Leonardo da Vinci did. That's just subtle modeling in form of light and dark. Caravaggio will ramp up the chiaroscuro, bring this tenebrous, very dramatic lighting. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Counter-Reformation wanted to make sure that the message they were presenting was adhered to by the painters. And so there were three directives that I think were important. The first was to deal with themes of conversion and martyrdom. Okay? The Catholic Church was on the offensive. They wanted to recruit. They wanted you to understand that you are with us or you are against us. You could make the argument that Michelangelo's Last Judgment, which was painted in 1536, was the first shot fired to say, you know, we're turning a page here in terms of how we're managing our public relations. So this chapel, the Pontarelli Chapel, does both. We have conversion, calling of St. Matthew, and then opposite, the martyrdom, St. Matthew. The next thing was to honor the saints, whatever that means. Do honor the saints in the way that you present them. We might already be in questionable territory here in terms of how Caravaggio has presented. We'll come back to that. And the last one is, tell the stories clearly. And this is the part that fascinates me the most. Okay? So, tell the stories clearly. This is the calling of St. Matthew. Let me tap that and zoom in for you there. And as you look at that painting, my question to you is, which one is Matthew? The one with his head down on the far left? Is there any other possibility? Maybe? Yeah? This is one of my Italian friends calls this the Robert De Niro. Are you talking to me? So which one is Matthew? Well, this is a fascinating question because there is some debate. Now, remember what I said before. Tell the stories clearly. We're already dealing with a little bit of ambiguity here, aren't we? Now, which one is Matthew? And I'm going to share with you a theory of the late great Terry Kirk. Terry Kirk was a professor, a colleague of mine. He taught me this class. And we had the occasion to go and stand in front of the painting and have a little discussion. And his theory was very interesting. He said this is about the speed of light versus the speed of sound. And his argument was that while the light moves across the painting and arrives on the head of the figure that is with his head down, the sound has not yet arrived. So he has not yet heard the calling of Christ and lifted his head up. And as a result, his argument then was that Matthew was the figure on the far left. And I said to Terry, interesting, but I don't agree with you. And I am going to prove to you what I think is the identity of St. Matthew according to a formal analysis, because that's one of the main things that, again, we talked about in this class. So, what is formal analysis? Does that mean we have to, get our coat and tie on to look at the painting? No, that's not what formal analysis is about. Formal analysis are the formal qualities that are used to make a painting. And these are the formal qualities that are involved when you make a painting. Size, subject, scale, light, shape, perspective, proportion, composition, rhythm. All of these things a painter takes into consideration when making a painting. And all of these can be used to convey meaning. So, my goal is I want to use formal analysis to prove the identity of St. Matthew. So here's the first thing that I'm going to do. I suspect that the horizon line, which is the eye level that one has when looking at the painting, which is not to be confused with where you are actually standing when you are looking at the painting, is going to assist my theory by putting the horizon line in line with the level of the figure in the middle of the table. That's who I'm going to target. How do I establish that? Well, I can see there's a line that's indicated by the window. And I can see that there is an ellipse behind the head of Christ, done in such a way that I'm looking up. Okay, so this is going to help me kind of isolate where the perspective is. And then I also note, you can see here, that I'm looking down on the table, right? So it's somewhere between where I'm looking down and where I'm looking up. And I wanted it to be there, right across the figure in the middle. But in the end, I decided it's probably up there. It was closer to where Christ's eye level is. Now, to explain exactly how I did all of that would require a whole other presentation. So we're going to skip that part, because it didn't help me anyway, so forget I told you. So what do I do next? Well, next I look at the composition. Now, what is composition? Composition is how the various objects and parts of the painting are arranged and organized. See, results inconclusive. Okay, thanks. Let's go. Let's move on. Here we go. So, composition. Now, the first thing I'm going to do when I look at the table is I'm going to draw a line, and I'm going to make the observation that the two figures on the left side of the table are both looking down at the table. And the two figures on the right side of the table are both looking at Christ, and that's Peter, by the way, in front, that have just come in. And then you have the guy in the middle. And he is looking at Christ and Peter, but his hand is also on the table. So he's kind of in the middle here. Now, what I love about Caravaggio, and Titian also does this, is how they create confusion to generate, to I think, catch your attention. It looks like those two hands are the hands of the guy on the left of the table, right? But the guy at the end of the table, his other hand is there. Okay? So, again, my argument now is that we have an individual at the table who's kind of literally and figuratively caught in the middle. And for me, that starts to indicate that individual is perhaps more important than either the two on the left, the two on the right. The other thing is that I think is extraordinary, if you think about this, is the hand gesture. Let me see if it's not going to take me to, okay, no, please. But the hand gesture, this gesture, think about how that creates confusion as opposed to certainty, and how the shift of that hand could have played a role. In other words, if you had it more like this, you would have no doubt that he was pointing to the guy in the middle. But it's kind of like, are you looking for this guy, which is he trying to pass the buck? Or is he in the process of pointing to himself? But it's brilliant. Okay? So, anyway, I haven't definitively proven it yet, but I think I'm on the right path. So let's go to one more thing here, and that is line. Now, in paintings, you have actual lines, like lines that would be created by the direction of the light or the lines in the window. But you also have something called psychic lines. And psychic lines are where people are looking or where people are pointing. And in this painting, there is a storm of psychic lines. And you can see individuals that are looking down, looking to the right, looking to the left, pointing to the left, and then that gesture there. But I think one of the most important lines in the painting is created by the sword that hangs next to the figure that's in the front right, and it's pointing directly at the center. And why do I think that is so important? Well, because I think it's foreshadowing what's going to happen next, or what's going to happen at the end of his life. Because across from this painting is the martyrdom of St. Matthew, and you can see that he is killed by a sword. So my conclusion marked for enlightenment by the very object that will be his end, framed by allegories of ambivalence and knowledge, and responding to the presence of Peter and Christ with a gestural duality that symbolizes a destiny and balance, I am led to believe that the central figure of the table is Matt. Did I convince you? Maybe, maybe not. This is an example of formal analysis, and this is a way to introduce you to formal analysis in the sense that I'm using formal analysis to prove something very specific. What I try to teach my students is that you can use formal analysis to find meaning that may not have